If a door opened tonight and offered you one perfect day from your past in exchange for 24 blank hours from your future, no memories, no photos, just a gap, would you take the bargain? Nora had spent 57 years telling herself she wasn't a person who made bargains with time. She paid bills on the first of the month, labeled freezer containers with the date, and kept her griefs folded like sweaters on a high shelf. Yet on the evening the river rose without wind, and the street lamps flickered in a rhythm she felt more than saw. She followed the current to the old iron bridge, and found a market where there had never been one. It wasn't lit like markets are. No neon, no barkers. Only lanterns with moths that seemed to know a secret and the slow bell of a bicycle someone kept riding and never arrived. The booths were deeper than they were wide, built from polished wood and shadow. Hand-lettered signs hung overhead. Borrowed tomorrows on approval and return. A woman at the first booth wore a jacket the color of pennies found in river sand. Her hair was white in the way winter light is white. She didn't look up when Nora approached. She listened forward, like people who have decided to believe in answers regardless of questions. "You're on time," the woman said. "Everyone is here. We keep another clock." "I didn't make an appointment," Nora said, and hated how her voice tensed, as if bracing for a teacher's correction. "No one does. The river does it on your behalf." She slid forward a parchment card that smelled faintly of oranges. On it, 5 sentences were written in clean black script. "One day from your past exactly as it was, except you may carry 1 sentence in. One day from your future, return to the river as blank time. No facts change, only what grips you when you remember them. You return at dawn with a question that insists. You may borrow only once." "I don't want to change the past," Nora said, though the ache in her chest insisted otherwise. "Good," the woman said. "We don't permit it. We permit posture changes. The way you stand inside what was. What's the cost?" 24 hours of your future," the woman said lightly as if describing a scarf. "You will live those hours. You will work and speak and make tea. But when they pass, they will leave no trace. Not even a taste. Blank. The river asks to be repaid with forgetting." Nora stared at the lantern's moths, the patterned wobble of their wings. She could name many hours she would hand over gladly. Meetings where she smiled until something inside her cramped, evenings when she scrolled through other people's joy and called it research. The hours after she hung up on her son the last time they spoke, and spent the night tightening shame into a knot. "I don't know which day I'd choose," she said. "People who say they have no regrets are lying, but too many regrets and you forget how to walk." The woman smiled. "We don't ask for a confession, we ask for a date." Nora swallowed. She could have said June 3rd, the day her father died, and she left the hospital to get a sweater and returned to a bed that held only quiet. She could have said March 21st, the day she told her son, Oliver, to take his boxes and his certainty and find his own door out of her disappointment. She could have said the bland middle day when nothing happened, which was the problem. Nothing kept happening, and she learned to call it life. "October 12th, she said, before caution could step between thought and sound. "The year my mother taught me how to braid bread, and we burned the first loaf and laughed about it for years. I want to be there again. I want to carry 1 sentence in." The woman nodded, as if Nora had named a season instead of a date, a good day to stand inside differently. "Your sentence?" Nora didn't know until she knew. "I'm allowed to be happy in the middle of an unfinished life." The woman wrote it down, not to approve it, but to anchor it. "You'll wake in that morning as the person you were, with the weight you carried then, and the day will hold itself the way days did. Only your mouth will know a new line. You will say it when the day opens a place for it. At dawn you will return here and pay the river, and you will bring back a question that refuses to be quiet. What if I can't find the place for it?" "It will find you," the woman said. "That's what sentences do when they've been waiting their whole lives." The coin she pressed into Nora's palm wasn't metal. It felt like pressed leaves. It tasted, absurdly, like honey on a wooden spoon. "Close your eyes at the first bell," the woman said. "Don't bargain, don't rehearse. Trust the market or don't enter it. The bell rang from nowhere, from everywhere, from inside Nora's sternum. She closed her eyes. She opened them to a kitchen that no longer existed. The window wore a lace curtain clean with sunlight. The counter was sugared with flour. The clock above the stove stood at 8:03. The radio was playing that song that everyone said they hated and sang anyway. Her mother was alive, sleeves pushed past her elbows, hair pinned up in the messy way that means you are fully yourself. "You took too long," her mother said, but softly, the way people scold you when what they mean is, "I'm relieved you came." The dough waited, but it judged us. "It can judge," Nora said, and heard how her voice was younger, less defended, less gravel from years of being reasonable. "We'll braid it into humility." They worked. They worked the way hands do when they remember without being told. Flour in Nora and his hair, flour on her mother's cheek, the dough warm with living yeast. The first loaf was hopeful and ugly. They put it in the oven like sending a child to school, proud, terrified, pretending not to peer through the glass. There were places Nora wanted to pounce with speeches. She wanted to warn about the winter ahead, the diagnosis, the moving truck, the quiet that would arrive one carton at a time. She wanted to ask questions she'd never had the courage to ask in the moment because she'd believed questions should be saved for when you can answer them in full. But the rules were the rules, and part of what made the day holy was its refusal to become a billboard for tomorrow. She had one sentence. She had to wait for the day to open its mouth. It did at 11:20 when her mother set the timer and leaned against the counter and looked at her with that small tilt of the head that always felt like a hand on her back. "You act like joy is a bill you haven't paid," her mother said. "Who taught you that?" It was not accusation. It was inventory. Nora felt something old, frenzy inside her try to run a calculator. She saw her own ledger, the columns of good behavior and withheld laughter, the credits she hoped would someday purchase permission to live bold. She thought of the market woman's pen scratching on parchment. She thought of Oliver S. name on her phone last month, and the way she let it ring because the pain of wanting to be forgiven without admitting wrong is a strange and private arrogance. She did not bargain, she did not rehearse. She said it like water finally crossing cracked ground. "I'm allowed to be happy in the middle of an unfinished life." Her mother's face opened. That is the only way to say it. It opened like a curtain lets the room become itself. She laughed the laugh that had taught Nora what laughter is for, and she put a hand on Nora's cheek, in a gesture that always made Nora feel like someone had set down a basket they'd been carrying too long. "Finally," her mother said. "Put that on a card above your sink, put it in your shoes, put it in your mouth every time you start arguing with a day that wants to be your friend." The timer dinged. The loaf came out, burned on one end and perfect on the other. They ate the perfect half with butter and jam, licking their thumbs like children. They gave the burned half to the sparrows, who disagreed with the premise of imperfection. Afternoon leaned against the house. When the sun slid into the place where your body remembers school buses and dogs, Nora and her mother played cards and didn't keep score. Evening arrived, not with a door slam, but with the sigh a house makes when it remembers it is a shelter. "At the last light," her mother said, without looking up from her hand. "You will do things I won't get to see. I'm not asking for a report. I'm asking for a promise. Don't wait to feel okay before you let days be good." Nora opened her mouth to offer an oath with capital letters. Something gentler came out. "I promise to keep making bread even when it burns." "That's better," her mother said. "That you can keep." When the bell rang, it was inside the smell of clean dishes drying. The lanterns of the market spilled into the kitchen, and then the kitchen folded back into the market, as if the river had rolled it up to keep it safe. Nora was standing once again before the booth, flour still on her hands. Her cheeks were wet and she hadn't noticed crying. "Your question?" the woman asked, as if asking for a ticket stub. Nora did not have to search. It had grown a voice and a spine during the day. "What small joy have I been withholding until I am done?" "Good," the woman said, as if the right answer is always a smaller truer one than you expect. Payment. Nora placed her palm on the counter. The woman took her hand the way a nurse takes a pulse. The market's other booths murmured. Chess clocks, distant bells. Nora felt a tug, not painful exactly, but definite. But like a thread loosening from a sweater you've outgrown. The woman released her and Nora felt lighter and the tiniest bit dizzy, like the moment after a roller coaster when the ground is insultingly still. Which hours? She asked, though she knew it didn't matter. They'll choose themselves, the woman said. You'll know only by their absence. You'll be kind to yourself then, yes? I will, Nora said, and surprised herself by believing it. The woman slid a little envelope across the counter. It was empty, by design. On the front was written, in a hand that could only be the river's for what you'll fill. Nora went home along the river path. The bridge groaned once behind her and closed its mouth around the market. Her kitchen was smaller than the one she had left, and the radio played a song that had something mechanical in it. She peeled an orange and placed the peels like petals on the counter, and stood for a long time with her hands flat on the wood, because sometimes that is the prayer. She did not become a new person. The morning still had chores. The email still sat rude and unopened. But she took a pen from the jar and wrote on an index card and taped it above the sink where hands go when they have bread to wash off. I'm allowed to be happy in the middle of an unfinished life. Around noon, when the sun chose the table over the floor, she thought of Oliver and the ugly, honest conversation they had not had. She set water to boil and took down the tea that he hated and brewed something else. She dialed and did not rehearse. He answered on the third ring and said her name with a question in it. I borrowed a day, she said, and let him laugh at that because he had always loved her peculiarities, even when he hated the way she weaponized them. I owe 24 blank hours to a river, so I can't tell you which hours I'll forget. But I want to tell you this before any forgetting. I'm sorry I chose being right over being close. I thought love was a set of good decisions performed flawlessly. It isn't. If you're willing, I'd like to make bread with you. It might burn. There was silence, the kind that is not a threat but a bridge. When he spoke again, there was a weight in his voice that sounded like a door put gently back on its hinges. I'm tired of being finished, he said. I'd like unfinished with you. They scheduled. Not someday, not we'll see. They put Tuesday on the calendar and then they left Tuesday alone so it could come like weather. She bought flour with her grocery order and a notebook that ruled its lines in soft blue. She wrote at the top of the first page in her mother's words, "Don't wait to feel okay before you let days be good." Then she baked a practice loaf. It came out lopsided. She ate the good half with butter and jam, and the sparrows had a party outside the window on the ruined half. Weeks went by, and now and then, an hour would slide out of her with no snag. The way a ring slips past a knuckle on a cold day. She would finish an errand and discover she had no taste of it. She would arrive in a room and someone would say, "How did your morning go?" And she would shrug without shame. It went, "I'm here." She learned to bless the blankness. It meant she had paid for keeping a promise to a day that wanted to be a friend. On a Sunday when the wind untied ponytails, she and Oliver stood at her counter and braided dough with 4 hands. He told her stories about the life he had lived in parallel, people she did not know because she had insisted for so long that the map end at the edges of her comfort. She asked good questions, and then asked one she had learned in the market. What small joy have you been withholding until you've cherry done? He pressed his thumb in the dough to check proof and said, calling you without a reason, and she cried, which did not impede the bread. They burned the first loaf. They ate the good half. They gave the ruined half to the centrifuge of sparrows. They said unfinished out loud like a toast. On a night when the river lay quiet as a sleeping animal, Nora went back to the bridge. Her feet knew the way now. Her mouth did too. The market was not there, and then it was, in that way some doors prefer. The woman in penny-colored jacket was mending a lantern wick. You came back, she said. I wanted to say thank you, Nora said, and slid a small paper bag across the counter. Inside was the heel of a loaf, the best piece, everyone knows, because it is half crust and half soft. The woman tore it and ate it with the unceremonious joy of people who trust bread. You kept your promise, the woman said. I keep it badly, Nora admitted. But I keep it. That is how promises are designed, the woman said. Badly kept and kept anyway. Nora hesitated. Sometimes during the blank hours I feel a little untethered. Of course, the woman said. You cannot open your hand and keep your fist at the same time. The river teaches both motions. I thought I would miss something important, Nora said. But it turns out the important things introduce themselves twice. They do, the woman agreed, smiling at some private inventory of important things that had introduced themselves to her. And when they don't, you know now how to invite them to knock again. The lanterns blinked. Moths wrote cursive letters Nora didn't know how to read. The woman adjusted the wick and the flame steadied. Will the market be here again? Nora asked. It is always here for someone, the woman said. And when it isn't, people who have borrowed learn to lend. That is how time survives us. Nora walked home with her hands in her pockets and the river on her left, making the sound rivers make when they forgive you for not knowing their language sooner. She turned on the low lamp. She taped a second card beside the first. Don't wait to feel okay before you let days be good. She wrote Oliver S. name on Tuesday and drew a crooked heart and didn't hide it when the neighbor came for sugar. She took a photograph of the loaf, but when she looked later she realized the camera had been in her hands during one of the blank hours. The image was smeared with motion, a comet of flour and light. She laughed. She wrote beneath it, evidence of a promise paid. When she slept, she dreamed of a bridge that had finally stopped groaning and started to hum. In the morning she woke before her alarm and set her feet on the floor and said out loud to no one and to the day, I'm allowed to be happy in the middle of an unfinished life. The sentence, satisfied, went to work. And if months later you saw a woman and a younger man in a kitchen whose window slanted generous light, and if you watched them braid dough with 4 hands, and if you thought vaguely jealous, I wish I could borrow a day, you would have been right and wrong. The market at the end of the river is tricky that way. Sometimes it opens in the place where you finally ask a question that refuses to be quiet. Sometimes it opens in the mouth of a sentence said, as if it belongs to you. Sometimes when the debt is paid, and the bread is cooling, and the sparrows are cleaning up what burns. The market opens in the easy way a door opens for someone who has learned at last how to knock.